Welcome. How'd you enjoy The Birds by Aristophanes? I know I enjoyed it. It was hilarious. I was literally laughing out loud the whole time reading the book. I mean, this guy had some wit. Um, I think about, I think the first half was maybe funnier than the second half. I mean, the whole thing was very funny, but the beginning when they're in the woods and like they're desperate and the birds are going to kill them. Um, I think about like when they were tying the pans to their faces and they were getting ready to get their eyes pecked out. I mean, his comedic wit and timing and everything is just so good. So I'm very happy we're reading him. And I look forward to the other stories as well. And the ridiculousness of the whole thing. I mean, the story read like a fever dream. Like it felt like a dream. Like the pacing and the way that it just started from nothing and sped up to essentially like the ultimate crescendo possible for a story was, I would say, disorienting, but not in a bad way. We start out and they're basically in the woods. Our two main characters, Pistheterus and Euelpides. They're in the woods, and it's like it feels very slow and sort of isolating. And then next thing we know, they're meeting some magical bird man, and then they're on trial in front of the birds, and it kind of picks up the pace. But it's still kind of slow. Like you feel like you're in sort of like the bird's isolated sort of mythical domain. So time is still kind of slow, although action is happening. And then they turn into birds, and then they build the city, and like it really picks up. And then now Pistheterus is the king of the birds, and everyone's coming to him, and he's holding court. And then the gods come, and then it really picks up. And then next thing you know, he's literally crowned the king of the universe and takes a god for a wife, which is probably the highest peak that a story could have. And it's just like unbelievable. I mean, I was so surprised. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised because it's a comedy, so it can't end, or it shouldn't end badly for the main character. But I was kind of expecting the gods were going to come in and like make war on them and like destroy the bird city. The fact that he was triumphant at the end and literally became like the chief god of the universe is it's so absurd that it's very funny in itself. Some themes that I noticed. First being I titled as Pistheterus the Tyrant. And so we noticed that, first of all, one thing I noticed is when they're starting, they have these pet birds. Like it's only mentioned for a very short period, but they got these pet birds in Athens, presumably. And the birds are supposed to lead them to Hoopo, who is this mythical man-bird figure. Right? He was a man, and then he became a bird somehow. And they're lost in the woods trying to find them. And they find him, obviously. But, what I thought about is, so they actually, like the way the story kind of flows, it feels like accidental that they're running into Hoopa, but they're not. They were looking for him from the beginning. And I think that Pistheterus kind of had this whole plan already in his head from the beginning. Like, he was dissatisfied with Athenian life, with bureaucracy, with sort of like the oppressive state and having all these obligations. So he made this plot to basically hold mankind hostage from the gods and then use that as like a leverage point to, take over the world, basically, which is like such a fantastical, like psychotic plot. And it works. But so I think he planned this out from the beginning, and they find Hoopo, and the whole story. Like I said, they go on the trial, and he's so witty, and see, based on his like wit alone, he's able to win over Hoopo and the birds and become their king essentially. But we see that Pistheteris, he has this, he has a really like strong grip on power. So he's very, he becomes a tyrant essentially. He's power hungry, and he doesn't want to share authority with anyone else. The first thing he does, basically with the city being built, is he banishes or he subjugates Eualpides, who is like his best friend presumably in this story. They did the whole thing together, and then he's gone from the story completely. And then you have all these sort of sycophants, coming because, there's power now. So this incredible city's been built. So, the priest and the poet and the lawyers and all these different people, they're coming. And on the one hand, you could see Pistheteris's rejection of them, because he rejects them all immediately and violently. He wants, on the one hand, you could see it as him saying, this is what I escaped. I don't want, society is coming to corrupt my bird world, and so I want to send them away. And I think that's valid. But you can also see it as part of his grip on power. He doesn't want to share power with anyone else. He doesn't want anyone in his court who can corrupt his image. And I don't think that the two things are mutually exclusive from one another, because he doesn't want the corrupting. He's sort of, it kind of plays into our next thing about him being a utopian. He doesn't want to share authority. He doesn't want Athens. He doesn't want the sort of worldly world, the sort of the materialist world that he's coming from, to be able to influence his new utopia. And because that's his set goal, he's not going to share his court with others because of that. And that continues. He then Prometheus comes and gives him advice, and now he's holding court with the gods, with Heracles and Poseidon, and he's not willing to give an inch. So he's an unyielding character. He has this silver tongue that he can use to get himself out of situations, but he's really unyielding, and his goal and his eventual achievement is absolute power. So, and we see that in the end. I mean, he literally, again, takes over the entire universe, essentially. Now, and this gets into our next subtopic, which is Pistheteris, the utopian. So, I think that this whole, if I had to say what was the political underpinning of the story and what was Aristophanes trying to say, it would be, like, we know what the context of his time was. And according to what I read, I don't know if it's fully known, but the story was, I think, written during or just before the Sicilian expedition. So this would have been after the siege of Athens with Pericles. And so we know Aristophanes had a big problem with tyrants. We had you had the Athenian democracy, which was for a time usurped by these tyrants, these despots, essentially, totalitarian rulers, and he hated that. And I think, and I'm sure that those rulers were trying to instill a utopia in their own way. They were unhappy with the way things went, with the war and with just general problems with society that are unavoidable. And so they use their will to take a firm grip on society, and then shaped it in their image. And I think that Aristophanes' point is that whenever you try to do that, it's never going to work out. It's basically, it's going to devolve into a tyranny, and then you're going to end up with all the same problems that you started with, but then you're also going to have, less freedom, and you're going to have less agency among the average person, which is what happens in Pisistratus' case. So he starts out in Athens, presumably, right, a democracy, and he's complaining about the oppression of the state and the bureaucracy and how that's, it's just something that he's trying to escape. And then what does he do? He establishes this whole world order, and he ends up being the sovereign ruler of it. And nobody else has any say, not Eualpides, not anybody else. And in the end of the day, the societal structure of his bird world is not all that different from the Greek world run by the Olympian gods. You still have sacrifice, but instead of sacrificing to the gods, you're sacrificing to the birds. There's still a sovereign sort of ruler of the universe, but instead of it being Zeus, it's Pisistratus. And you still have a government that is telling people what they can and can't do, but instead of it being the Athenian democracy and the bureaucracy attached to that, it's just Pisistratus himself. And obviously, the amount of agency and the amount of control that the average person would have over their lives in Pisistratus's monarchy, so to speak, is going to be less than it's going to be under the Athenian democracy. So I think this was Aristophanes taking a shot at tyranny and basically saying, and I think, maybe I'm reaching too much here, but I think it's also a statement about, it's just a criticism of utopianism, where it's like the world develops these natural low energy patterns, right? So it's like we see things in the world that we don't like. It could be, it's death. It could be whatever, poverty, whatever it is. And we see them, we know they're bad. We try to change them. And so we move mountains to change the entire world. But the reason those things existed in the first place is not because some evil cabal of people made it that way. It's because that's a natural state of living in an entropic world. And so when you try to upend the world order in order to get rid of these natural wrongs, you're not going to make a better world. You're probably going to destroy ancient traditions and constructs that were good, that were built to save against something. And then you're also not going to get rid of the evil you were trying to destroy. And I think of communism, obviously, and other things too. When I think about that, that's the one that sticks out the most in my mind. So yeah, I think that Aristophanes was. I think this was a criticism of utopianism and despotism and tyranny. And then what else do you say? Another theme that I thought really stuck out was this power of men over the gods. We see in the story the whole plot hinges upon the fact that the gods need sacrifice from men in order to survive. Basically, they're so desperate to get that sacrifice that they're literally willing to give us. Zeus is basically willing to give up his sovereign power. Pisistratus, he positioned, because of the bird's position in the sky between the heavens and the earth, they're able to act as a middleman and blockade the heavens from getting sacrifices from the mortal men and from worship. And this is so powerful. This is so important that it literally, it brings the gods to their knees. Where, like I said, I expected them to make war And obviously, maybe they could have, and he just didn't do it that way because it's comedic as a plot purpose. But I think if we're going to read into it literally, that the worship is so central to the god's existence that they're powerless without it. They can't even make war on the bird kingdom because of that central function of their lives being taken away. He describes the gods, some of the barbarian gods that are under Zeus, as starving, and they're going to have a rebellion against Zeus because they're not getting their sacrifices. So what does this mean? What I take it to mean, I took this as a very sort of atheistic view of the gods and religion, which is to say, because not only does denying the gods their sacrifice starve them, but the birds are replacing the Olympic pantheon and are empowered by that to some degree. So to me, that implies that human attention and human worship determines what gods are powerful and which ones aren't, basically. So it kind of creates the idea that the gods are in the mind of human beings and a creation, and they only have as much power as the human mind assigns to them. And that's the logical conclusion of what he's saying. And as I said, I in the writing, I think that this is like an atheist, sort of like an atheist standpoint. And I think if people were reading into it, and I'm sure they did, because this was going to be the talk of the town for ages, I'm sure, that some more pious individuals would be critical of that. But it is just a comedy, so I think he would hide behind that. Obviously, I don't believe. That's not obvious, but I don't agree with that standpoint. But I think that's what he's arguing. And I also thought that it was funny because I always just am amazed by the ease of influence over most people, like the masses, you would say, which is if something's trendy, everyone's going to do it. And he kind of makes comment on this because we see that once the birds establish their city, their Cuckoo Nelopolis, what is it? I don't even remember. It's very funny though. Cuckoo Nebulopolis, that men all over Greece and presumably the world start worshiping the birds right away. The city's not even built, and priests and men are coming and they're acting like birds, and it's so true. People will gravitate towards what is powerful, and people will gravitate towards whatever everyone else is doing. And you could imagine that these people who are worshiping the birds, they're giving up their ancient tradition of worshiping the Olympian gods to do it, but it doesn't matter. We see that all the time, right? Most people are very agreeable, and their minds are malleable, and they want to fit in, and so and they're bored, and the new thing is attractive, and so they're willing to join in. Essentially, we could say they're sheep or whatever. Not everyone's like that, but I just thought I had a chuckle at that commentary. So overall, I thought it was excellent. It was really funny. It was almost like out of body and very dreamlike, especially when we were getting towards the end. But very funny throughout, and had some interesting commentary. I think if I was going to pin down the main theme, I would say that it was a criticism of utopianism, and that utopianism ultimately leads to tyranny, which I do agree with, in most cases at least, and probably in all cases. So really excellent. And I'm looking forward to reading the next one. The next one we're going to be reading, I think, is The Clouds, and that's the one where he criticizes Socrates. Just double check that. The next one we're reading is The Clouds, and make sure that you purchase the book for using our Amazon affiliate link so that you can make sure that you're reading the same version as me. It also supports the project, and you can build your own library, which is what I'm doing. So it's really fun, and you do it one book at a time. You can find us on social media with links in the description and on our blog. Make sure to check out the blog because that's where you get the full free content. Everything we do is free and always will be. So you can find our introduction videos, all my notes that I take, and I write out notes while I'm reading. Those are on the blog only. And then the conclusion video like this can also be found there, also on YouTube, Spotify, X, Rumble. But thank you. Had a lot of fun with this one, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So I'll see you on the other side.